It's Thanksgiving week. If you're in the United States, happy long weekend.
Yeah.
That's as much as I can give you this year.
If you are in the kitchen making a lot of food and enjoying it, I am excited for you.
People have already, it's Wednesday. People are like the cooks among us, including myself. I am currently in a kitchen somewhere with my sister.
I'm not. I'm in a car
brining a thing.
Driving to my mom's in Ohio.
As Jen just reminded me, Friday is
Black Friday.
Just
sure.
People.
So Black Friday is when you like go to Target and buy a TV. Small Business Saturday is the one we're going to talk about in a minute. And then Cyber Monday is when you go online and spend all your money. And then basically you're done Christmas
shopping. And then there's
shopping.
Giving Tuesday. Now we've just got a whole thing.
Sure. It's like a whole week where you spend money you don't have.
Yeah. Just to make yourself feel something. First of all, though, before we get into all these days, this week of shopping, welcome everyone to Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and apparently just hog-tied to the wheels of capitalism.
Okay, let's first talk about Black Friday.
Okay.
Because you would literally, that the meme, the sort of tweet that goes around or whatever, the message that goes around that's like, what is the one thing that if you heard I was doing, you would know I had been kidnapped? Like, shopping on Black Friday, like going anywhere near a mall the Friday after Thanksgiving is definitely that for me. What I want to know is like, what is it? Who are these people who like finish their turkey and then go to Walmart?
I don't know. Listen,
for a midnight opening.
I have occasionally been a person who has been in a mall or like on Michigan Avenue, I guess, the day after. And it kind of depends on whether or not Little Romance is home. And like if my family's here and my mom wants to take him shopping for Christmas, because like, of course he's like, just give me money now. But, you know, she's like, I just want something for under the tree. But I remember once being in like a Macy's and a woman, like a clerk, looking at me and saying, like, what time is it?
She had seen the dark place.
Yeah, and it was funny because I remember thinking like it almost felt like the same way you feel when you're in a Vegas casino. Like time you step in and time just ceases to exist.
Yeah.
Now, meanwhile, I was really under the impression like malls were pretty much dead. But when I was in Hartford a couple weeks ago to see Little Romance, we went to Sephora, which is like at this mall, and it was like a Friday night, and it was packed.
Hopping.
And I was like, what's going on
kids?
here? No,
because like we used to go to the mall, right?
Sure, but like some of it, but like also families and people, and I was dumbfounded. I mean, I was like, what's going on here? And he's like, you know, Mom, he's like, Connecticut really reminds me of Ohio in that way.
I mean, Connecticut is the Ohio of New England.
Yeah. So
anyway, that.
I was happy though, because, you know, if you need to go to the mall, it's nice to have a mall nearby to go to that has stores and, you know, business. So you go hard.
So, if you love malls or if you love the idea of malls, there is a great book about malls called Meet Me by the Fountain
by Alexandra Lang.
Alexandra Lang, who I think is a sometimes listener of the podcast. It's Meet Me by the Fountain, an inside history of the mall. And it's basically like a cultural history of what the mall has been since like the 1950s, but also Alexandra and Jen and I are all sort of the generation where the mall was like the water cooler.
Yeah, that's where you went.
On Friday night, you had your parents drive you to the mall and like you would hang out with your friends and like be shenaniganing, you know. So it's interesting though, because I think now that we took my daughter, because we live in New York City, so we don't have a mall.
Yeah.
Like there's New York City is a mall. And so we were in Rhode Island a few months ago and I took her. Oh, no, it was last year, Thanksgiving. We were in Rhode Island. And so on like the Saturday, we went to the mall.
Yeah.
And she had never been in a mall. And like, I I really like, she was 10 and I really feel like she was just like overwhelmed by like,
oh yeah,
there is really like nothing to do but like shop. And so she was like, we can go I gave her like $20 and I was like, by the way, $20 does not buy you very much at a mall anymore, everyone. Like, this was my mistake.
Anything, anywhere, really.
Exactly. But I gave her some money and I was like, you can. And of course, she blew it in the first store we went. Like, she was, because she's 10. So it's like, if there's money in her pocket, it must be spent.
Listen, I'm that way and I'm a grown adult.
But I think that malls are really fascinating and whatever. Like, I also just think like I'm like somewhat disgusted by companies that make their employees work on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
So there is that too. Like,
I feel like that was kind of a thing. I don't know if it is anymore. I guess it probably depends on where you live.
There was for a while like a list, and I feel like it was during the pandemic. People were like, "This sucks."
Yeah.
Like, not only is it Thanksgiving Day, but it's also during a pandemic where there were lists of like, here are stores that don't open on Thanksgiving Day, so like you can frequent those instead. But also like, are the deals? I guess the deals must be that good to like stampede the doors of Walmart. And I guess like if you want a flat screen, you got to get in the Hunger Games. Like that's how it goes.
My understanding is actually the best time to buy a TV is right before the Super Bowl. So
is that true?
Well, I guess all the TVs are on sale. It's like they didn't sell them at Christmas and now there's like a big watching event coming up.
Well, there was this whole thing that came out, oh God, years ago about, and I'll see if I can find it for show notes, where Costco released this, like, because Costco has this incredible return policy.
Yeah.
Everyone, like, if you have a Costco anywhere near you and you were thinking, this is the part where Sarah evangelizes Costco, even though I sort of hate going there. But
you can hate going there and still love it as a place. It's fine.
Like, first of all, it's like their employees get treated really well. It's like it's employee owned. They have great benefits. Like, it's a good, solid company in that way. But then also it has this return policy where like basically you can return anything at any time and just say like, I bought this here and like it's now broken, rotten, whatever.
That
and
seems wrong. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and say I think you should not do that, but fine.
No, I mean, and so that's the thing, right?
You
like,
know, Sharon, our listener who is a Costco worker right now, is probably cursing your name, Sarah. It's fine.
Oh, no, I didn't know that, Sharon. And Sharon's probably going to get on the Discord and tell me all the ways I'm wrong. So I apologize in advance, Sharon. But like, this is like the Costco of my brain.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what's fascinating about this return policy is it feels like surely humans wouldn't be decent people about this return policy. But I think largely they are, right? It's like there was that whole piece, this piece I will find and put in show notes, but LL Bean had this return policy also. And they actually just changed it because like people started like bringing like 20-year-old flannel shirts in and being like, it has a rip now, you know? And it used to be, anyway, point is, I remember there being something related to right before the Super Bowl, people would go to Costco. They would buy the like 89-inch screen, bring it home, watch the Super Bowl on it, and then return it. And like Costco realized like this is happening. And then they did change that particular policy, or like, I don't know if it's like at that time of year or like what it is, but it's anyway. That's my Costco story.
Here's my thing. We don't feel sorry for corporations, but we do feel sorry for the people who work at these places. And so that's what I just be kind to people.
Also like be kind. Yes.
I know. When you're behind someone being awful.
Lead with empathy, everyone. Like it's a rough time of year for everyone. But so that's Fridays.
Small Business Saturday, though, is when you find the local independent store, independently owned, you know, small stores in your community and you support them. And books shop locally, right? So, you know, these are like, there's like a local shoe store or, you know, bookstores, obviously, right? Like any number of small independently owned places. So, and I think it's smart. Like it just feels really like, okay, I'm going to support my community. One of my favorite stores in Hyde Park is called the Silver Room. And they have like just like really cool jewelry and like books and some cool t-shirts and clothing and, you know, Chicago branded stuff. So it's like, yeah, you find those places and you just go to the Silver Room and spend your money. And also, of course, for all of us, if you can, bookstores. And if you don't have one nearby, use bookshop.org and pick, you know, whatever indie bookstore you want to support. So you can do it even if it's like, you know, prohibitive or, you know, there are places without.
Or if you don't have a local indie that you like really love and want to support, you can choose
anyone you want.
Pocket Books in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, for example, who is selling our best of the year boxes. You can go to fatedmates.net/best of and like order one of those boxes. It comes from a queer, feminist, inclusive bookstore in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Hi, Pocket.
So, yeah. So that's so in honor of that, we thought it would be a really fun episode today to talk about booksellers and bookstores and have that be like the way that we celebrate Small Business Saturday.
Can I tell you?
Yeah.
I want to tell you a story about shop local, whatever, what's it called?
Small Business Saturday.
Small Business Saturday.
I got you.
Thank you. This is a fairly new invention. And what I mean by that is it's since I became a writer.
Yeah.
So
100%.
But the first year that this happened, I remember I was invited to a books because I, for many years, spent Thanksgiving exclusively in Rhode Island. And the first year it happened, there was a local bookstore which no longer exists. I'm so sad, called the Savoy in Rhode Island. And they invited me to go and be a guest bookseller for like 2 hours of Small Business Saturday. And they like gave me an apron and like it had a pin on it.
Adorable.
And like it was basically like ask me for a recommendation. And it was really fun. And so like people would come. So I got to play bookseller.
So
like,
cute.
It's like basically every author's dream. Like I often think to myself, like, if only I could convince like the women at the Rip Bodice just let me like come and work for an afternoon just to like recommend romance novels to people.
I mean, it does sound really fun, doesn't it?
So if you're out there and you have an indie bookstore, like if next year maybe you want to invite some local authors to come and like play
it's really fun
bookseller for a couple of hours. And so I remember that year I like played bookseller for a couple of hours and then I stuck around for an hour and wrapped books.
It's
like
so cute.
Gifts.
Oh
and
my
it
God.
was like
that's fun.
Really fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I'm sure not every author would be sort of so delighted to like hang out and wrap gifts, but a lot of us would. And I had a great time.
I mean, and like really specifically, the reason to support these stores is many small businesses like this, like essentially report that they make. I'm going to make
all
up some,
their money.
I'm going to make up some statistic, like 75% of their earnings for the whole year in this 6 weeks or whatever.
Well,
right?
That's why it's called Black Friday,
Yeah.
right? We should say that. Like, it's called Black Friday because like most stores are in the red until Thanksgiving. And then
Boom.
They really get the boost that carries them through the next fiscal year.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing. When you support stores, local stores, and I think one of the things we're going to talk about over and over again in this episode, because every single one of my books has this angle, is these are community centers, right? So like, support these stores means you're supporting these places that, sponsor your little league teams and like people can hang out in. And after the election, there's a new small Black-owned bookstore in Hyde Park called Call and Response. And I was looking at their website and they were like, I think they have like Dungeons and Dragons after hours or something after the bookstore closes. But there's usually like an hour off. And, the owner had written on the site, like, we're going to stay open that hour because if you just need a place to hang out, like these are vital places to your neighborhood and to places like people really want to live and like meet and be with each other. So
yes.
It is a good idea to, if you can, right? And, it might just be you saying, I'm going to set aside $50 and try and just spend it in a store that I enjoy, that I want the community to be a part of. Like, that's going to make a big difference to the bottom line to these places.
And I will just say, as much as, there's been a lot of discussion over the years about romance and independent bookstores and how they don't carry, everything. And I think all of that is fine. And it's a conversation for, whatever. It's a conversation that's been had. But if you're looking for what to do in an independent bookstore, children's sections
books,
and indies are always like really robust and beautiful. So just remember there's that. And then often independent bookstores have local people, like local writers or like histories of the local area. So if you have like a nerd on your list who like really wants to know about that waterfall, there's usually that kind of thing in there too. So and this is probably a good place, Jen, for us to talk about the links again, the way that we've sort of shifted links, because we did that recently. We're making a concerted effort for all the reasons that Jen just said about like in indie bookstores and libraries being good citizens in our communities, like being community centers, places where we will be able to many in the history of political organization, bookstores have been a real cornerstone of the resistance. Libraries, too, right now are at the forefront of the fight against book bans. We want to honor that. And so what we are doing is we are shifting the way we link to books on the website and also in your apps, in your apps as you're seeing. So if a book is available in print from a traditional publisher, now the links will go to bookshop.org, so that if you have the capacity and you are able to purchase from a local independent bookstore, you can. Our hope is that you will choose to do that if you have the privilege, if you are privileged enough to be able to do that. That said, we understand that Amazon is often cheaper, more financially available. We understand that KU and other parts of Amazon are very important to a robust independent publishing career. We understand that KU is also a place for marginalized authors to find their audience. And we understand that like ebooks remain, a critical piece of the reading, universe. That said, if you are not available widely, we will, of course, or if a book is not available widely, we will, of course, continue to link to Amazon. But I think what the change from here, the mentality that we're working with here is independent first.
Yeah. If we can, right? And if you can, right?
And remember libraries. Remember libraries, everyone. Libraries and librarians need us now more than ever. Love your local librarian.
Yeah. And the biggest way to support your local library is to circulate books there. Like that's what they need. People read them. And so one of the things I also really recommend, if you are like me and you tend to like look on Barnes & Noble or Kobo or Amazon or whatever first, is you can install a plugin, especially if you use Chrome. And what you can do essentially is you download this thing, you enter in what libraries you belong to. And then when you search any book site, whether it be Goodreads or Amazon or bookshop.org even, it will show up. Is this in your local library's catalog? It'll say, and you can even add Hoopla. So it'll say like there's one print copy and 39 e-copies and 24 people waiting in line. And so you can really see like, oh, hey, this is available at my local library right now, and go directly to get it without having to do a separate search. Essentially, it's doing the search for you while you were searching, on whatever book site. And I use this all the time because then it's like the first thing I do. Okay, hey, I'm interested in this book. How much is it going to cost me? Is it available in KU? Is it on Hoopla? Is it at my library? And I can essentially do all those at the same time now. So I'll put a link to it also in show notes. So the best way to support your local library is to borrow books, ebooks, any kind of materials. That is what your library needs to show. Look, our community values us. Look at how many books are circulating. Circulation stats are the way. So borrow books too. This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Book of the Month.
I gave myself a Book of the Month subscription earlier in the year because I deserve nice things. And the reason why I did is for two reasons. One, it felt to me like Book of the Month's kind of special curation of books was really designed to deliver readers a read that is really fun.
Yeah.
And so when you think of Book of the Month, you think of it as like the best beach read, or in this case, because it's December, the best snow read.
Snowy
right?
read in front of the fireplace.
And like, I expect to find, I can find a great romance, but this is also one of those things where if you're a romance reader, like, you can kind of trust Book of the Month to deliver you a fun read outside of our pool, like in the wide ocean of literature, which is sometimes scary. So, but interestingly, this month I chose a book that is a romance that I had not heard of, Jen.
Amazing.
So I chose Most Wonderful by Georgia Clark, which is a queer holiday romance about three adult siblings of an absolute chaos actress and singer. They each have different fathers, but this is their mother, and they have all kind of been summoned home for the holidays to her manor house in the Catskills. And there's like one who is a successful Hollywood showrunner who's in love with the lead actress in her show and doesn't know how to deal with it. There's one who's like a chronic middle child who is a stand-up comedian and like not sure how to find love herself. And then there's the baby boy, who just proposed to his coworker girlfriend in front of the whole company.
Oh,
what are
no.
you doing? And was turned down.
Oh, no.
And so these three go home for the holidays to their chaos mother, and they have to like work through family and love and, you know, all of that. And it's just tailor-made for me.
And it sounds perfect for the holiday season. So if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to our promo code and link. You can also do the same thing at our website, which is fatedmates.net. If you use the code STUFFED during Black Friday weekend, you will get your first book for $5 and also a special surprise gift. If it's after Black Friday weekend, you're going to want to get that same deal using the code TINSEL. And remember, it's the holiday season. This is a great gift for someone in your life who is a real reader and you're never sure what book to get them. So we love Book of the Month and thank them for sponsoring this week's episode.
Now that we are finished loving on independent bookstores and libraries, we are going to talk about books that are set in and around independent bookstores.
I had a lot of fun reading for this one.
Yeah, I don't know why we came up with this, but we just thought it would. For what it's worth, this topic has been on the calendar for like 6 months.
For 6 months.
It's like we knew we were going to do it, so we were prescient. Let's talk about like the appeal of the bookstore in the novel.
Oh yeah.
Because I feel like this is not just a romance thing. This is like broadly, like there's always like the bookshop on the corner. When I think about like romance and bookstores, of course, like for me, You've Got Mail is the kind of,
I know.
It's the like prototype, right?
I'm still so mad about it, though.
I know it ends completely wrong, everyone. I know that. Don't yell at me. Like it really does end entirely wrong. Like she ends up working for Barnes and Noble, and like what?
He puts her store out of business. I was like, listen, we should have fucking known all this was coming the minute they made that movie.
Nora Ephron was lost to
Austere.
us. So, and that is a retelling of The Shop Around the Corner, which is like from the 1940s. So it's a very, with Jimmy Stewart. So there you go.
There you go.
Speaking of Christmas. But I think that there's something very like the bookshop in fiction and in storytelling is very much about like, it's sort of a nod to the reader that like the author also loves, like we all love the same thing, right? That sort of like, there is a coziness to a bookshop in fiction that is kind of similar to a bookshop in real life. Like you get that sort of same feeling in a way that like a restaurant in fiction and a restaurant in real life like don't necessarily feel the same way. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, it totally
but like,
does. Yeah.
it feels like and I think that people, if you ask somebody who is not a reader about this, they would be like, I don't understand. I think for readers, the bookshop is a location that feels very magical.
Well, so yeah, of course, it makes sense. It's like how movies are always about like the stage. You know what I mean? Where you're like, of course you love it because it's illuminating the best parts of like what you love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And giving like the sort of idealized like fairy tale perfect version of it. What was that movie with Gwyneth Paltrow and Shakespeare in Love? And I remember people being like, I'm really surprised that won. And I was like, why? It's like every actor probably was like, look at how great and wonderful and awesome. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's something to that, right? Like the whole idea that it's like a community that the foundational part of it is books. Like that really speaks to us, of course.
And also, I think there is a little piece, and this is, I think those of us who, like I just said, like have a little fantasy of like owning a bookshop, working in a bookshop, like living that sort of bookshop life, right? I know that there are a lot of booksellers who listen to this podcast who are like, it is incredibly difficult to be like to live that bookshop life, and I know that. But that sort of fantasy, we all have that fantasy, and these books give us the opportunity to like live out that fantasy in a really like powerful way. I mean, there were a few I ended up sort of choosing, specifically, but like when I was thinking through like what are the ones that I want to talk about, there were several that were like, and she inherits a bookshop, and she decides she's going to revitalize the bookshop, and like,
or the bookshop is in trouble and they're going to save it.
Yeah. And so I think like there is that community piece too, right? Like when you think about the Gail Carriage, our heroine's journey, all romance moves toward community, that now we're seeing like is so ubiquitous in current romances.
Yeah.
The bookshop has given us that sort of like movement toward community for a lot longer than now.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. It was like weird. I did the same thing I always had to do, where I was like Googling like romance novels in bookstores, right? I was like, if I ever read one of these,
of course.
And I was
You've
like,
never read one.
I know the entire prototype, but have I ever read one? No. But I did end up reading a bunch of new ones because of that, which was fun.
I have written one book that has a bookshop sort of at the center of it, and it's not even a real bookshop. It's like in the Rogue Not Taken, Sophie has this kind of like dream that she wants to have. She wants to own a bookshop. Like she just wants to leave London and go back to her like the little town she grew up in and open a bookshop.
Well, and I think that's it too. Like it really speaks to the like that dream of like, I mean, it's like real Hallmark movie vibes, right? Like a simpler, more pure life in some way, right? Like,
yeah. And then, of course, she gets back to the town and she's like, ugh. So, all right, let's talk about some books. What do you got?
The Vampire in the Bookstore by L.M. Drew.
Terrific.
Because I was like, that title, hard for me to pass up. So in this one I thought was actually kind of really clever. So Declan is this, he's the vampire, so full of ennui, so tired with his life, but he loves bookstores, and he like has his particular haunts, like the ones he always goes to. And he walks into this one bookstore, and he has this like, interaction with Rosamond, who he just like runs into in the bookstore, and they like strike up a conversation, and he's very aware of her heart pumping all that delicious blood through her body. And what happens is, the bookshop is about to close, but she's so alluring that he asks her out, like essentially for dinner. And, this is like a very like almost like insta love, like a quick read. Like I want to say it's like novella length. I'm pretty sure it was under 200 pages. And so the owner of the bookshop, who, you know, he has an account and all that stuff, right, is like, you know, the bookshop's closing and she's holding a book, and he's like, well, just put it on my tab. We're going to go out to dinner. And, you know, they go out to dinner. And the thing that's amazing is, like, so she starts talking about how much she loves books, and he realizes that what he wants to do is take her home and show her his personal library, which of course he's never shown anyone because he's alone in the world, because he's a vampire. And it's got like big, you know, Beauty and the
personal
Beast,
library.
Right? Big Beauty and the Beast.
Terrific.
Big Beauty and the Beast vibes there. So anyway, what ends up happening in this, and it was just like really charming, is then when you get into Rosamund's point of view, you realize that she has actually engineered this. She essentially like engineered the whole like meet cute. He doesn't realize this, but she was trying to meet him. And it turns out that what Declan essentially is not just a reader, but also a writer. And what she does is her day job is like repairing old books or whatever, book restoration. Well, it turns out that what she has discovered is he has like writers would love this. He has this quirk in his writing style that she has recognized and realized that he has been writing books over essentially like a century. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And she like put it together like, wait, the phrasing of this book about how to do something is very similar to this fantasy. And so she was able to like essentially like put together all his pen names.
She's like a forensic book person.
And so then, you know, he agrees to turn her. They have sex, the end. And I was like, I mean, literally, like I think it all takes place in like 24 hours. He's like, I'm totally in love with you. You're in love with my library and with books. And you figured out my secret writer identity. We're done here. And it was just delightful. Like, it just was like a really fun. And even though like the bookstore is just like the site of the meet cute, so I felt like a little like out of bounds maybe. The whole like the writerly life, right? It really captured that vibe. And it was really cute. So that was The Vampire in the Bookstore by L.M. Drew.
Oh, I'm writing that down. That sounds great.
Her discovering all his pen names was a great, like, I was delighted by it.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by 1001 Dark Nights, publishers of Dorinda Jones's Graveyard Dog, a Charlie Davidson novella.
So this is set in the Charlie Davidson world, and here we have Izzy Walsh, who thought she was safe. She dyed her hair, changed her name, moved 1,500 miles away, all to get rid of her ex and his motorcycle club, when there is a knock on the door in the middle of the night. It's Michael Cavalcante, and he has essentially like covering for his friend who's a maintenance tech. He's just being sent to this woman's house at 2 a.m. to like fix her hot water heater. Well, instead, he gets tased and gets frying pan to the face.
Isabella's just doing what she needs to do to keep herself safe.
That is correct. And she's not just keeping herself safe, Sarah. She's also keeping her daughter safe, who has been a secret, right? So she has to really protect her daughter because she knows that if they find out the MC Club, then this is leverage. So how's she going to keep this sexy Neanderthal quiet while she is planning and plotting essentially how to get herself out of this mess? Only it turns out that he doesn't want to harm her or her daughter, and he wants to know who does. Maybe she's found an ally.
I bet she has. If you, too, would like to find an ally, you can read Graveyard Dog, a Charlie Davidson novella, right now in print or ebook. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to 1001 Dark Nights and Dorinda Jones for sponsoring this week's episode. Okay, so my pick is J.C. Lee's. My first pick is J.C. Lee's Booked on a Feeling.
Perfect title.
So good. And so I think JC's great. I also think like this is a friends to lovers romance, and probably JC's probably one of the few writers who can like turn me toward this. Mm-hmm. So our heroine Lizzie is a lawyer in Los Angeles, and she has convinced herself, or I think more her mother has convinced her that like being a high-powered attorney is like the dream job. And she finally has it. And so at the beginning, talk about a Hallmark setup, right? At the beginning of this like book, she realizes she sort of has a moment of like true anxiety at work, and she tells herself like she's burning out, and she says, I'm going to go home and just like home to my small town just for a little while, like just to like reset, and then I will come back and like do the job. And so she goes home to this like tiny small town, and she rents a little apartment above a bookstore. And like and in this small town, her like best friend from childhood, Jack, which is just like a really nice romance novel name. Like he's just steady. Jack is a steady, strong dude. Jack is a accountant at his family's brewery. And like, but aside from like, you can't just like have a full-time job as the accountant at a brewery. Like he's also like a handyman. Sometimes he works there. Like he lifts a lot of heavy things, which is why he has such a terrific six-pack. You know, like he really does the job, Jack. And he's just like a steady, strong, like presence in this town and in Lizzie's life. And he has been in love with her since they were kids. Like she's always been like Lizzie Lizzie left, but like Lizzie was the one. And when she comes back, she's like she's living upstairs from the bookshop. The bookshop is owned by a single mom who like needs help. Like there isn't a ton of money. Like, this is a very real perception of like, like it is hard to run a bookstore. And Lizzie's like, no problem. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to help you. And she sort of has this like really like fantastical kind of like, wouldn't it be lovely to work in a bookstore kind of feeling. But there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. Like there are tons of little like jobs that need to be done. And so she turns to six-pack handyman in the brewery, best friend from childhood. And she's like, Jack, I need your help. And he will never say no to her. So they like work together to get this bookstore kind of like back up and running. And like, it's a very, you all know this story. It's like the two of them kind of like relearning each other, like coming to better understand like who they are and who they grew to be. JC doesn't do this thing, Jen. I know that your like least favorite thing is like, we were in love when we were kids, and
it's okay.
No. We were in love when we were kids, and like we haven't changed at all. Like the feelings are all exactly the same. Like that's not what's happening here. Like they really do relearn each other. JC threads that needle in a really good way. And I think that there is, but at the same time, like there's this big community. The bookstore comes with like a group of people who like this, the owner and all of the like lives that touch the bookstore. And then there's also like Jack's family and JC's mom. Like there are all these different kind of characters in the book who push and pull them in different ways. And it ends up really feeling, and I think all of JC's books feel this way to me, it really feels like Lizzie and Jack against the world in a lot of ways. Like it's these two together forever, and like anything that comes will, be great. But there is a great moment in this book where Jack is like in the bookstore and he is holding a historical in his hands, and he kind of like scoffs at it. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Like that doesn't feel quite right. And then the literal next line is like, he couldn't believe it was unbelievable that this man would have enough core strength to bend her that way and still be able to stay upright.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And it's like the perfect nod to the romance novel community. Like it's a perfect moment.
Sometimes Mr. Reed's romance is like, I just sometimes look at the bookstore and I think, and I was like, yeah, just stop talking right there, buddy. I mean, it's fine.
But we all know, like,
that's great.
The gravity defying hair. And she is like bent in half over his arm,
and he's just like, holding a unicorn in the other arm.
Exactly.
Oh, romance.
So anyway,
I love you.
JC loves romance novels. JC loves bookstores. And this is, I think, her book for that.
Okay, so my next one is actually a Harlequin special edition. This is called Once Upon a Charming Bookshop by Heather Lee Bell, and this is the sixth book in the Charming series, Charming Texas series, which is like a small town romance. And Charming Texas is on the Gulf Coast, so it's like near Houston, but but just like a little beach town. I have not read the other ones in the series. This is, even though it's book 6, I was perfectly fine just like reading it as a standalone. And so what we have here is Twyla Thompson is running the family bookshop. And of course, like, it's not going great, right? Like, it's a small town. It's, there's not as many tourists as there used to be. It's, hard to run the bookshop. And she feels a lot of anxiety about it, and just sort of like not sure how to handle that. But what happens is her childhood best friend, Noah, comes back to town. And
see, another childhood best friend.
Right. Like, I think these are like really, this is like a very cozy romance. Like, like Silhouette Special Edition is, it's, very, it's like, it literally is like reading a Hallmark movie. Complimentary, everyone. And so what happens is, and you're kind of like, what's going on? Like, there's some tension between them. Well, it turns out that Noah had an older brother who 10 years ago, so like they're like 28 now, right? So like right at the end of their teenage years, Noah and his brother were out on a boat and they were like thrown overboard. They hit a sandbar, and I think Noah was the one driving the boat at the time, and Will died. And Twyla and Will had been dating. And so basically, like, Noah, of course, had, was super in love with her, even though they were best friends, but this was his brother's girlfriend. And I don't think people really knew that the breakup had happened. And so, like, Noah, to deal with his grief, and he had always been, like, sort of to differentiate himself. He loved his brother, but his brother was, like, the perfect son. Noah was kind of like the bad one, right? Like, he was like riding in fast cars and, that kind of stuff. And so he goes off, I think it's to Houston or Austin maybe, and actually like works as a firefighter. He's sort of like living on the edge in that way, like dealing with his grief and his pain about his brother being gone. Until there's like a near accident where he like literally almost dies doing his job. And so he's like, this is not what I want to do with my life. So he returns back to Charming, and this is the part that like everyone in town, including Twyla, is like, are you kidding? He buys the company that's like the charter boat tours. Cause he's like, this is what I always wanted to do. Like, I'm not going to let the fact that like, this happened to my brother stop me from like, this was what I wanted. I wanted to live here, and like, and he and his brother wanted to buy this business and like essentially like be on like vacation every day. So he just decides, like, it was essentially like a sign. He's going to come back and do this. But like, everyone's, how are you going to tell your mother? And meanwhile, Twyla has really kind of been stuck in stasis. This town is so small that she's been like Will's sad ex-girlfriend for a decade. So anyway, Noah comes back. Twyla, it doesn't think they are firmly in the friend zone until they are not, right? And so the question is like, how are friends and family gonna, adjust to this new parameters around these two? They're not going to be friends anymore. They're going to become lovers. And, also like, how is his determination to kind of like bring tourists back to town and help our bookshop? So anyway, it's Once Upon a Charming Bookshop by Heather Lee Bell. And like I said, it's just like really, like I said, if you love like a Hallmark movie and you want to read that in book form, this is the book for you.
These are all like small town books in a lot of ways. And that's really interesting to me because we all know like independent bookstores take a lot of capital, right? Like it requires a lot. It requires a kind of vibrant town for a indie bookstore to stay open. I was talking about the store that was in Rhode Island, the Savoy, and it was in a like small town in Rhode Island. and a town that like that Taylor Swift has a house near, right? Like it's not a town that people don't go to, right? Like it's a vacation town, a seaside sort of Rhode Island coastal town, and it couldn't stay open. And so I think like there's also a mythology and a fantasy here about small towns that's really interesting to me. Like, I'm not going to talk about this book, but one of Lisa Kleypas's Friday Harbor books, which are all like a touch magical realism, is set, I think, in a children's bookstore, like, again, in a small town. Like, I think if you sort of point to these stores, to these stores in books, often they come in these kind of like idyllic small towns. But I want to talk about KJ Charles's Seditious Affair, and that's not set in a small town.
There you go. Perfect.
We've had KJ Charles on the podcast. If you are a KJ Charles fan, you should go listen. Well, even if you're not, you should go and listen to her Trailblazer episode because it's terrific. And A Seditious Affair is one of those books that like KJ Charles, this is one of the books that like people point to as like, this is one of the best. I mean, you would be hard pressed, I think, to
This is your favorite, isn't this?
To choose a best. This is not my favorite, but it is one of my favorites. This is certainly like a top for me. When we decided, obviously 6 months ago, we were going to talk about bookshops, this did not occur to me. But then this week, this occurred to me because I think this is a book that like right now, if you are thinking about revolution, this is a book that will give you a lot of joy. So our characters are Silas Mason, who is a radical. So obviously this is set in England in the 1800s. England has a very like clear social structure and power structure, right? Like It is both a monarchy. It is a monarchy. There is a very strong division of power. There is a very strong division of wealth, right? If you're thinking kind of like, whatever. It is all of that. It is all of that. Silas is a bookshop owner, owns a bookshop, and he is selling in many ways. He is selling like essentially seditious works, right? Yeah. So like works that are promoting the radical perspective that citizens' rights should matter, that social justice is important. Works that are pamphlets that are incendiary and calling for things like political revolution, right? Unfair working conditions are in here. I mean, like he is a true radical, right? He sells these books in his shop. He distributes these pamphlets through his shop. And surprise, surprise, he is also the author of many of these
What
texts.
A shock.
Okay. He is also, though, a dude who likes it hot.
I love
kinky.
That for him.
So he is a member of like a men's only sex club. If you love a sex club, this one's going to be very much for you. Also, if you like the dom submissive kink, this is going to be for you because at this sex club, he runs into Dominic Frey, who is a highborn man who works for the Home Office, and his job during the day is to like curb seditious activities. So, and like uncover
KJ
who is
Charles.
writing the.
KJ Charles just has no fear, and I love this.
No, how is this going to end up? How is this going to end up happily ever after? Right? But like Dominic also likes it hot. So
I hope so.
He turns up at this sex club. They meet each other in a kind of like very kind of masked, like I don't think they are masked, but like, it's a very sort of like secret sense. They don't share names. Like, they just have these like blazing hot interludes. Silas, again, she makes the proper choice, which is like Silas is the dom, right? Dominic is the submissive here. So like there are all these like interesting power plays, and they don't know who each other are.
Nice.
And so as it's sort of getting the rope is tightening around them, right? Like they're getting closer and closer to figuring out who they are. They are also like becoming more and more entangled with each other. Like, and it is becoming clear that these two people just like they are desperate for each other. And I think like there is something. This has all of the other pieces. It's actually the second or third in the series. You will definitely benefit from reading the earlier books in the Society of Gentlemen series. But I think you can read this out of series. Like, I think this is just a really great example of how, like, when the needle is threaded perfectly on conflict, like, it is heartbreaking, right?
Yeah.
This idea that these two people who are, you know, there's this moment, Jen, where like they finally end up like they kind of know each other, and they have this like this moment where Dominic says to Silas, like, "Bring me your revolution," and of course he means like in bed, but it's like this just gutting moment where you're like, oh, it's so hot. Why is it so good? Why is she so good? She's so good. Anyway, it's just great. I think it's really interesting. I think like I pulled it up this morning and I was like, I think I'm going to reread this book this week. Like it's perfect. It's just a book that if like right now you're like, what does revolution look like? Like, how do we, I don't know that it answers that entirely for us right now, but it feels really important.
Yeah.
Like this is one of those books that like, this is a book that right now, if somebody were saying like, make a list of the 10 books that like do the work right now, this would be possibly top.
Well, that's high praise, but
that's KJ Charles's A Seditious Affair.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Melissa Diamond, author of Holiday Wedding.
This is really cute. It feels like if you loved The Holiday, the movie, this might be something that you're interested in. It has two completely separate but interconnected romances going on in this one. So there's Gwen. Gwen and Caleb are madly in love. They have plans for a beautiful Christmas wedding, but then there's a blizzard, things start to go haywire, and then, oops, Jen, Caleb's stalker turns up, and it's a problem. So the question is, are these two going to make it happen? Are they getting down the aisle at all? Meanwhile, Gwen's best friend, Jenny, and her maid of honor turns up from her just terrible life in Los Angeles where her career is stalled, her boss is terrible, her life is just a mess. And she shows up in New York like ready to really deliver as a maid of honor, and then only to discover that this wedding blizzard stalker situation is going on. And to make matters better / worse, Caleb's bodyguard, Dean, Jenny has known him for ages, and she's always kind of had a little thing for him. But he like put her on ice a long time ago, and now these two are going to have to work together because she happens to be a reporter and investigator, and he is a bodyguard. And these two are going to get to the bottom of this stalking situation and make this wedding happen, Jen.
All right. So Holiday Wedding has this dual point of view with Gwen and Jenny each telling their own stories. It's a page-turning holiday romance that has suspense, but also enemies to lovers, forced proximity, and grumpy sunshine. And of course, snowed in, only one bed. So also, I want to point out that Melissa offers two versions of the book, one that is spicy and open door and one that is closed door with only kissing. So you can choose the level that is right for you. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Melissa Diamond for sponsoring this week's episode. Okay, I'm going to actually recommend a YA book. I know we don't do tons of YA on here, but one of the things I was thinking is like so many times, especially as you're going into the holidays, you might have a young reader in your life, right? Like, young teenager who you think might be open to reading a romance. And so I thought this would be a good time to talk about one of those books, right? You're like going to the bookstore to shop for, the teenagers, So the book I'm going to talk about is called Love in Winter Wonderland by Abiola Bello. And it is also set in London. And so in this book, we have Trey. His family has a small Black-owned bookstore that they have owned, like it's his dad's, grandparents or whatever, right? So like they have owned this bookshop, and it's called Wonderland for generations, but they have not really kept up with the times. And so, they've sort of rested on the laurels of kind of like their reputation. But what has happened at the beginning is there is a bookstore down the street that has opened. And I don't think it's quite a big box store, but I don't think it's an indie. Like, I think it's like undercutting them essentially in every way. And all of a sudden, no one is at the bookstore anymore. And Trey has always had, Trey is 8, like they're 17, he's 17. The main characters are 17. And so he's always like kind of been a little annoyed that he has to work at the bookstore and right, like just feels like, but once he finds out that they are in dire straits, and of course that there is a developer who maybe wants to buy the bookshop, he really comes online as being like, I want to try and save, do what I can to help at the bookstore. Now, he has this girlfriend who is, he and this girlfriend are like the prom king and queen vibe, like really popular. Everyone loves them. But you can tell he doesn't even really like this girl. It's like sort of this really interesting push-pull where he feels kind of like he's with her, but, he's really questioning, like, what am I getting out of this? Like, what, who is this person? And Ariel is this girl who goes to school with him, who has always kind of had a crush on him, but like really like as like, I'm not in love with him anymore, right? I don't like him. And they like have this interaction at a party where she like spills a Coke all over him and he like kind of storms out of the party, and she realizes actually that something's going on at the store, and like kind of is like, and she's an art student looking to get like a scholarship. Like this is really richly layered. Like this author, Abiola, does a really great job of like layering in lots of like the things kids care about, right? Like, where am I going to go to college? And my family afford it? Her father has died of cancer earlier in the year. So it's just her and her mom and a younger sibling. And so she wants to try and get a part-time job to essentially like save money for what comes next. Enter this scene that I thought was honestly really well done, which is Trey's best friend convinces him that they should have a party at the bookstore. And what they're going to do is charge an entry fee, and then they can give his parents the money, right? Like, and you're like, as an adult, you're reading this and you're like, oh no. Like,
this is going to go so poorly.
It's going to go. And it's just like, I read it, I felt sick to my stomach, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, it's essentially like, it's not a total disaster, except that someone left like the taps on in the basement and flooded the basement and all of the stock down there. And his mother is like, and it turns out that, then like we get another layer. Trey's mom wants to sell the bookstore to the developer, but dad doesn't want to. This is his legacy, right? He falls off a ladder, the dad. And so Trey and Ariel end up deciding to like, they're going to save the bookstore together, right? Like and it's really cute. Like she paints a mural of like famous Black authors, and they like create like this community event they're going to get people to come in for. She goes down. Yeah. She goes down to the other bookstore and like does research on how they're doing stuff. And it's just honestly really, but like, he also has to like let go of that other girlfriend and realize that he has way more in common with Ariel, who cares about the same things he does. Like, right? She cares about art and he cares about books. And it's just like it is a terrific, like I said, really richly layered. Like these kids are not just, I mean, sometimes I think I enjoyed it as an adult, right? Like, and I feel like sometimes when you're reading YA, you're really like, hey, I'm not really the audience, but the layers of characterization and plot and conflict that are layered into this book make it, I think anyone would really love it. But I also think, like, if you have a teenager in your life, this would be a book that they would really, truly enjoy. So it's called Love in Winter Wonderland by Abiola Bello.
All right. Well, we're going to go from YA to erotica because...
Sure. That's how we are here.
And I talked about this. I'm sort of bummed because I think I must have just had this like book on the brain because I talked about it in the little like kidnapping episode, but we're going to talk about it again. I want to talk about Charlotte Stein's Taken, and which is, this is old school Charlotte Stein. So I know a lot of people have come to Charlotte through her recent rom-coms, but like if you are anything like me, like you fell for Charlotte like way back when she was writing like Two People Chained in a Basement, which is what this is essentially.
Which is literally what this is.
But it's funny because I pulled it off the shelf the other day in preparation for this, and on the very first page, she refers to the hero as a werewolf. So I feel like she was just like always moving in this werewolf direction, but like maybe go back to this. So the premise here is that Rosie and her friend, like it's a very light premise, but like, so Rosie and her friend go to this rare bookstore a lot. They like to go in there because it's sort of like quiet and like feels like magical in some way. And the owner is this like enormous, hairy, like, he's just like, he's just like big in every possible way and gruff and grumpy. And whenever they like touch the books, he like yells at them. Right. And so her friend decides like she's going to get back at this, like, this guy, and like they get in trouble, and the friend sort of takes off out of the store, and he grabs Rosie and then like drags her kicking and screaming like down into the basement. Sure. And handcuffs her to the bed. There's a bed in the basement, Jen, of course.
I mean, listen,
we're not monsters. Okay, handcuffs her down there, and then immediately is like, oh shit, like he's like, I'm gonna call the police, but like she's handcuffed to the bed, and he's like, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake, right? Like this, I could be in big trouble for what I've done. So he starts to try to like get her out of the handcuffs, and then he can't. Like he has trouble getting her out of the handcuffs, and then like it just becomes like he turns into this like perfect Charlotte Stein hero who is simultaneously like, I don't know, 8 or 9 feet tall, very big in all directions, but also just like utterly embarrassed and like just like awkward in like his like, he doesn't know what to do with himself. Like, I mean, like Charlotte's whole kink is like, I'm so big, don't touch me, I'm grotesque.
Sure.
Right? And so they end up like, he has a classic also Charlotte kink where like he's super kinky, but like thinks that makes him a grotesque in some way. And so they do like, he's a super dirty talker. Like this goes directly down, like straight into the Charlotte Stein erotic vein. Like there is, everything, it becomes just the two of them. And it's like the two of them have never existed outside. Like nothing in the whole world exists except for these two in this bookstore basement. And he's like, he wears like tweed jackets and, fiddles around with books. And then he fiddles around with other things too.
I would hope so.
So, anyway, it's a delight. Old Charlotte Stein really is in many ways unmatched. So you will enjoy yourselves if you're looking for a very sexy bookshop moment. But it is also like short. It's like 100 pages. Because, I mean, how much longer could it be?
Listen, the promise of the premise, it's right there. It's just going to be all packed right in there.
Exactly.
Okay, so speaking of old school, I'm going to talk about an old school Kristen Ashley book called Rock Chick. This is, I think I don't know if
my
this was her
God.
first book, but like this is
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably from
My
before
God,
50
you just
Shades.
gave me like a
Yeah, you're like
you
a
just
flashback.
pulled me through my life to a very particular place and time.
Yeah. And so, but you know what? I feel like sometimes like that's I was like, oh yeah. So the main character is Indy Savage. And she inherited a bookshop in Denver called Fortnum's, I think. And this is then like sort of like home base for like the rest of this series, which is not okay. You know how there's like this bookstore is like a Hallmark movie? Okay. This bookstore is more like a slapstick comedy. And so in this book, Indy has, and it's all like kind of she narrate, it's her narration. And this is, it's early enough that like, you get like the sense of like the Kristen Ashley vibe. Like if you start reading and you're like, this is not for me, like her writing style is very specific and it's actually pretty tightly controlled here. But she has been in love. So her best friend is Allie, and Allie Nightingale has an older brother, Lee. And Indy has been in love with Lee Nightingale her entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was like in her late teens and he was in his early 20s, she would like kind of throw herself at him. And at one point, he just like shut her down so hard that she sort of was like, I'm going to avoid him. But because she's best friends with Allie, she's like, yeah, so I only had to see him at like Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, Valentine's Day, same, you know what I mean? She's like, basically, he was impossible to ignore. But she like did her level best until one of her workers in the bookstore, which like her, like, I think she inherited from her like kooky great aunt who would just like loved the 70s and like was a flower child. And Indy's like, yeah, that's my vibe too. One of her employees essentially gets into some trouble with the local mob, as one does, and she gets shot at. And she is like so shocked that she doesn't know what to do. And so she is like, well, I'm going to call one Allie's brother. So the other brother is Hank and he's a cop. But she feels like that will be the wrong thing to do because her employee is like, just don't call the cops. So she instead calls Lee. And Lee essentially owns his own like PI firm. But basically they're just like badasses. Like literally that's what she calls him. Mm-hmm. And Lee shows up to help her. And the whole, this is like there's kidnappings and explosions. And it turns out that he's basically been in love with her too. And they finally get together and they like do it all over the place. And it's just like this like madcap, like absolutely over the top adventure. But if you like this sort of like, gruff alpha, really like in the mold of those like early 2000s romances, then Lee Nightingale's gonna push all your buttons and then some. So this is the first in a long series where every single person ends up, there's like a huge cast of characters. Kristen Ashley has no fear. She's like, I'm gonna put 23 people in this scene. I got you. And Fortnum's, the bookstore, remains essentially like home base for Indy and her friends throughout the entire series. And it's like the corollary, if you will, to like badass PI headquarters, right? Like this is the domain of women in these books. And it's honestly, it's just really fun. It's fun in like a dated way. I would say like maybe look at content warnings.
That is always the case with Kristen Ashley. Like, you need to just know if there's something weird going on in there.
Yeah, there's probably some really wacky language and yeah, where you're like, well, what happened? But if, what it reminds me too of like, if you like Stephanie Plum, like it had like that, like there was a definite kind of vibe of books that like kind of emerged in the late 90s, almost like if it, and I think Rock Chick is essentially like one of those books. So that's Rock Chick by Kristen Ashley.
Yeah. Like it's of a time.
It's of a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not going to be for everybody, but you might be like, oh, I remember that and want to revisit that time too.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Sarah Kate, author of Keep Me.
So Killian Barkley is a brooding Scotsman, which
Excellent.
Everybody just click right now.
Exactly.
And all he wants is to be left alone. He's had enough heartache to last a lifetime, and so he does what any rich Scotsman would do. He turns his famous ancestral home, Berkeley Manor, into a den of iniquity where he just holds a bunch of wild parties.
Sure.
And
why not, Jen?
I mean, that's what I would do. So at one of these parties, New Yorker Sylvie Devereaux has a run-in with him. She's not even there for the party. She's there to find or look at this famous heirloom. But she herself has this like really hard shell. Like she grew up as the daughter of famous but neglectful parents. So she just like, they have this like really terse kind of mean, sexy interaction. And she's like, I'm out of here. But a few weeks later, Killian's family approaches with a proposal. They want Killian and Sylvie to marry. She's going to, calm down his playboy reputation.
Sure she is.
And a year later, she can walk away with $10 million.
What?
So obviously, what's she going to do? Is she going to grow closer to him, or is she going to break his heart and walk away with $10 million? What's a girl to do?
What is a girl to do? Well, if you really love a modern day marriage of convenience, an enemies to lovers story, and a broody hero with kinky vibes, then Keep Me is probably for you. You can read it right now in print, ebook, or audiobook on Amazon and everywhere you buy books. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Sarah Kate for sponsoring this week's episode. I want to talk about Alexa Martin's Better Than Fiction, which I think has this very cute twist on this. So all of the books I could think of that were about bookstores or booksellers were about people who love books. And this book has a twist in that it is about a bookshop that is inherited, but it is inherited by a character who does not read.
Oh, wow. That's smart.
Right?
Yeah.
A really clever twist on it. So Alexa Martin's Better Than Fiction, here's the structure. So our heroine, Drew, has recently lost her grandmother. And her grandmother was extremely important, an important figure in her life. And she is really going through it. And so she her grandmother owned a bookstore. And this bookstore was a true community center.
Mm-hmm.
It has a hilarious group of the book club of older women who have a romance, an erotic romance book club.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many little extra characters in this world who were connected to her grandmother and connected to this store. And when Drew inherits this book, she's not that sure that she's going to keep it, but she was kind of passionate. She has sort of lost her way. But in losing her grandmother, she's really lost her North Star. And so she was really she was sure she wanted to become a photographer, but now she has no passion to do that. She can't find that love anymore. So she's okay, I'm going to run this bookstore. And she feels really obligated to do it. There's a real responsibility layer here that feels both obviously it keeps her close to her grandmother and all these people who knew her grandmother, but is this really what she wants? She doesn't even read. So an author the older women who have this book club, the Dirty Birds book club, right? It's a romance and erotica book club. In comes our hero, who is an author of romance novels, and Jasper comes, and the Dirty Birds meet him, and they're immediately we got a medal. So they hook Jasper up with, it's set in Denver, this book, and so they hook Jasper up with Drew, just a sort of oh, Jasper, you're new. Why don't you meet Drew, who can take you around and show you the sights. And so they like kind of have this thing where she agrees that she's going to show Jasper Denver. And he is like, well, I'm going to show you books. And so they have this thing where like he tries to make her see what's beautiful in like the books, in the shop, in the whole thing. And it's this like lovely little conceit where they, go all around, like it's a little road trip romancy in the sense that like, they have all these little journeys. She shows him like all her favorite places and all these like places in town. And then he gives her books to like show her himself and like in all the ways that he was made. And then she like slowly rebuilds her passion for photography. Like it's a really lovely, very kind of quiet romance that is about the way love pulls us out of grief.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm almost, it obviously is a romance novel. There's a happily ever after, but it almost feels like it lives like kind of in the romantic fiction world. Like it is a much bigger story than just like these two people, but it's lovely. And so that's better than fiction.
Nice.
By Alexa Martin.
Okay. I have one more, which is, I'm still on I got on the Molly Harper train, and I apparently am never getting back off of it.
I wondered if you were going to talk about this book.
Well, I don't know if it's the same one. I was going to talk about Nice Girls Don't Have Fangs. Is that the one?
Oh, no, that's not the one I was thinking of.
Well, I began and ended with vampires.
I actually didn't pick it because I was like, oh, Jen's going to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, in this one, the part of the reason I picked this one is because it had like the other part of this trope. So there are 4 books in this like Jane Jameson series. And this is the 3rd book. And in the first book, she's like turned into a vampire when she, like Molly Harper, I swear to God, I love your brain. She, I like just need the humor in these books. Anyway, she gets fired from her job at the local library, and instead of a severance check, she gets a gift certificate to like the local bar Shenanigans. So she goes to Shenanigans and gets wasted, and then like meets this really handsome guy named Gabriel who like sobers her up, and she goes, sobers up, goes home, but on her way home her car dies. So she's walking home, and a local thinks that she is a deer and shoots and kills her. And Gabriel comes along and turns her into a vampire to save her life. And then they start dating. So like basically her sire is her boyfriend. And so they have a couple of books that it's like, what's going on? And then in the 3rd book, and it's like cute world building in terms of like how vampires came to be like known to humans and how that all works. And so in the book, she and Gabriel are like traveling through Europe, but like something's really wrong. He's getting all these mysterious messages, and he's leaving her and saying they're business meetings. And so she thinks that he is cheating on her. So she does my favorite thing, which is she's like, I'm leaving. And he's like, so he basically kind of like, she's like, I think we broke up. Like he didn't even try to stop me. And she goes back to her small town, which is like in, I don't know, Tennessee or maybe Kentucky. I can't remember. And basically she owns a bookstore called Specialty Bookshop that is like for the undead. Mm-hmm. And they can come in and like shop for books that are for like them. But she is really trying to make it like sort of like, she's like, I want everyone to feel welcome here. And so she's like goes to the Chamber of Commerce and you know what I mean? Like she's just like trying to make this like, there's like she inherited the bookstore from essentially like an elderly kind of gentleman she knew who is now a ghost, but like that ghost is having an affair with her aunt who left her. You know what I mean? Like it's just like a very patented Molly Harper kind of goofy, like not goofy, but like funny, like truly funny, like like charming, funny, like great banter, like really funny, like things happening in this town, like and I just love her voice. I love the voice of this character. You know, there's one part where she like figures out her best friend is he is got and his wife are expecting a baby, but his wife is a werewolf. So she's like, wait, what's happening? You know, like, I mean, it's just like everything. And I love these books because the audiobooks are terrific. They're really fun reads. And I was really delighted by the idea of essentially a specialty bookshop for the particular needs of the undead population of this area.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that's, sorry, it's called Nice Girls Don't Have Fangs. And even though it's the third book, you know, it's like Molly does a little bit of like upkeep so that you could sort of figure out what's going on. But definitely I would recommend reading them in order and just landing on number 3 and finding out what happens once that bookshop gets, you know, listed in the community chamber.
Amazing.
Chamber of Commerce, like, you know, list of businesses.
Okay, I have like just a handful of historicals that I just want to name check.
Okay.
Because they're, you know, historical bookshops, they're often like side character.
Yeah,
like they're
right.
not.
It's not as rooted in the, yeah.
Right. And also some of them, like for example, Lorraine has a bookseller, The Earl Takes a Fancy. The heroine runs a bookshop and the Earl in question is like kind of into her and he keeps coming to buy books from her. So if you like that one. And then Anne Mallory has a bookshop. There's a girl who the heroine works in a bookshop in 7 Secrets of Seduction. And then the hero hires her to come catalog his private library.
Ooh, I love it.
And then I wanted to name check something else, which now, and then there's I mean, this one is I feel like bleh. I feel like everybody's read this, but of course there is also Beach Read, where it is 2 authors, but the bookshop in town becomes a piece of the puzzle. That's Emily Henry's Beach Read.
There's Bookshop Cinderella by Laura Lee Gerke, which I have not read, which is a historical where she runs a bookshop in London and the Duke comes in and offers to make her a diamond of the first water, but because of a bet with his dirtbag friends, of course.
Yep.
I was also a book I started and literally was just like, it was kind of on my list to like just kind of look at, and then I was mad I didn't get to it. It was called The Wrong Mr. Right by Stephanie Archer. She is a bookseller on her 30th birthday, and it actually is, it had a truly laugh out loud like beginning, which is she sold a book to a local like kind of older man, and he thought it was Lord of the Rings, but it was really orc erotica. And so he's like reading it to her out loud. Like he's like,
that is funny.
And she's horrified because she looks up as he's like Don, the local guy, like kind of like, I thought it was Lord of the Rings, but like, listen to this. And the local hottie, Wyatt, who owns the surf shop, is like there, like kind of cracking up. And in the plot of this book, she essentially is like tired of being like a spinster essentially and talks Wyatt into helping her like be cool and beautiful in exchange for like social media help for his shop.
Yeah.
And then the other ones I wanted to mention, this is a mystery series. There's like a romance in it, which is, and I've mentioned this series before, the Adrian English Mysteries. He owns a mystery bookshop in Los Angeles and then ends up like solving mysteries with the help of this local LA cop named Jake. And Jake is like, and look, this book has, you know, again, it is not a romance. Like he and Jake develop a romance over the course of the series, but you know, Jake is closeted and like actually like gets married at one point to a woman, and Adrian's really heartbroken. There's like homophobia on page, right? So like, please check content warnings for this. This is not a, you know, this is a book that it's like much grittier. The series, I think it's maybe only 6 or 7 books though. And but I really enjoyed the sort of like bookseller as mystery bookseller solving mysteries. And, you definitely are kind of rooting for him and Jake to figure it out. And for Adrian to like not have to hide who he is the way Jake is. So that becomes like a big part of the romance between them. But yeah, definitely like lots of ups and downs in this one. And, like I said, it is not a romance, right? So like all of the sort of like promises we make to each other about like what kinds of things characters will have to deal with, I think are not true in this book. So in the series, but I really enjoyed it. So that's the Adrian English Mysteries by Josh Lanyon.
There are about 1 million that you're all going to tell us about in comments. This is my favorite thing. Now, people on Instagram and Blue Sky are constantly telling us like, don't forget this one. What about this one? Those are my favorites. So don't forget to go check the comments too on all
There's
of
a Chloe Lease book where he's a bookseller. I mean, there's so many. So I know that we didn't get to them all, but you will tell us about the ones and you can find other people's recommendations.
It's true. Anyway, yeah, we don't have no housekeeping. But if you really want to talk about all the other books that we have missed, then the place for you is our Discord.
And BookBub.
Talk about that. Oh, and BookBub. Okay, so two things. We have started a BookBub, and by we, I mean Eric has started a BookBub. And he is quietly, like, when he watches television, adding books from our back catalog into the BookBub. So if you head over to BookBub, make an account, and follow Fated Mates, you will get an email
if
whenever
one of those books goes on
that
sale.
We recommend goes on sale, which is a great way of buying books cheap.
Yeah, and you can say like what platform you want. So you can say if you're Apple Books or Kobo or Amazon's or Barnes & Noble, and so it will tell you that it's on sale in your platform, which is great.
Terrific. Couldn't be better. So you can head over and do that. While you're there, you could also follow Sarah McLean, like just for fun.
You could follow me. I don't know why you would, but you could definitely should follow Sarah.
You can follow Jen, but you could also follow me. And
to hear about new releases, for example.
Like if, for example, I had a book coming out in July. And then we have, what else? The
Discord.
But the Discord is really where you want to be because that's where the smart people are. You're just listening to dummies every week. But if you head over to Patreon, to our Patreon, which is fatedmates.net/Patreon, and sign up, you can join our Discord where people are talking about romance novels literally all the time.
It's amazing.
I reinstalled something, Jen, the other day. And I didn't turn off the sound on the the notification.
Boop, 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 boop.
And literally I was like, what is constantly pinging me? And it was the Discord. So they are just, it is hopping over there all the time. So head over again, fatedmates.net/Patreon, and you can join the Discord. And also when you join the Patreon, you get an extra episode from us every month of just, banter. And other than that, I'm Sarah McLean. I'm here with my friend Jen Prokop. We are Fated Mates. You can find us every Wednesday in your podcasting apps, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can find our show notes with full lists of all the books that we talk about in the episode at fatedmates.net. Click on show notes for more of that. And then if you're on Instagram Threads or Blue Sky, we also are on Instagram Threads and Blue Sky, and you can find us there at either Fated Mates or Fated Mates Pod. Follow us. We talk about new episodes. We also boost people's recommendations when they recommend books to us. And, you can join us there. Shop indie if you can this weekend. And don't forget that our Best of the Year episode box is available now. You can order it between now and December 10th to get it in time for Christmas and Hanukkah, which both start on the same day. And you can do that at Pocket Books. If you go to fatedmates.net/best-of, you will see all the information, the books that we chose for the box, and be able to click through. You'll get a letter from us, a sticker, and the books.
Perfect.
Thanks to Pocket Books for taking care of that.